Most people assume that the Elden Beast became the Elden Ring because of this item description. It's the description of the legendary Elden Star's incantation, which tells us that it's the oldest of the Erd Tree incantations, and that long ago the Greater Will is said to have sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. Just about everyone who read this description seems to have assumed that the witch in the subordinate clause is modifying the object beast, but I would argue that a more sensible interpretation would apply that modification to the direct object golden star, which is really the focus of the sentence. In other words, the phrase, which later became the Elden Ring, refers to the golden star that was sent by the Greater Will, rather than the beast that was born on it. If FromSoft wanted to tell us that the beast became the ring, you'd expect that sentence to be structured as, "It is said that long ago the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast, which would later become the Elden Ring, into the lands between." But the way the actual in-game sentence is structured points to the star, or more literally what was most likely a meteorite, becoming the Elden Ring. After all, if we were meant to interpret that statement as meaning that the beast became the ring, why do we find it in the description for the Elden Star's incantation, rather than the Elden Beast's remembrance? Of course, there is one line in the description of the Elden Remembrance that some players have taken as confirmation that the Elden Beast is the true form of the Elden Ring. It says that the Elden Beast was the vassal of the Greater Will and the living incarnation of the concept of order. Some people have argued that if the Elden Beast is the incarnation of order, and the Elden Ring is what imposes order on the world, surely they must be the same thing. But I don't think it's that simple. The beast and the ring do seem to have a clear, inextricable connection to one another, and the relationship between them kind of reminds me of another iconic video game duo. If we imagine the Elden Ring as kinda sorta analogous to the Master Sword, a divine object brimming with the power of the deities of Hyrule, then the Elden Beast would be comparable to Phi, the spirit of the sword created by the goddess Hylia to guide the hero who would wield the sword. It's a bit of a stretch, but for the sake of this analogy, we can think of the Elden Beast as basically Elden Ring's version of Phi, an ethereal entity sent by a god to accompany a divine object that would allow mortals to wield godly power. I think the purpose for the Elden Beast is to guard the Elden Ring against the enemies of the Greater Will, and I think that explains what happened to Marika. She shattered the ring, so the Elden Beast crucified her.
Queen Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision. A god in truth. But after the Elden Ring's shattering, she was imprisoned in the Erd Tree. A grim punishment for shattering the Order, despite her godhood. The fingers speak.
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and the vision's vessel.
The reason I think it was the Elden Beast that crucified Marika is that when you fight it, if you're unlucky enough and you don't successfully evade the attack, the Elden Beast will do to you exactly what it looks like was done to Marika. So the obvious question here is, who cares, right? What difference does it make if the Elden Beast is the Elden Ring or is simply an entity that accompanies and maybe inhabits it? Why does it matter? Well, I think the idea that the beast is the ring essentially subverts the entire story of the game. Obviously, the Elden Beast is alive and well during the events of the game, even though the ring has been shattered. It seems to have even crucified Queen Marika, the dominant god of the lands between. So if the beast is the ring, that implies that shattering it didn't really affect it, in which case, why does it matter that it was shattered? Why does anyone bother trying to put it back together? You might be able to do some mental gymnastics to get around this issue, constructing various explanations, but the obvious answer is that they simply aren't the same thing. The beast and ring are connected but separate, distinct entities. The whole game is centered around the shattering of the Elden Ring and the consequences of its destruction. But if the ring is the beast, that seems to undercut the significance of Marika's actions by implying that the ring wasn't really affected by its shattering, and it still managed to crucify a god after seemingly being destroyed. If the beast is the true form of the ring, that means that the Elden Ring itself is in power and has imprisoned Queen Marika, despite the fact that our goal throughout the game is to collect the shards of the Elden Ring and maybe put it back together. The best reason I've seen for believing that it was the beast, not the golden star, that became the Elden Ring is the claim that the Japanese text of the Elden Star's item description is more clear on that topic, and I won't get into that since I don't speak Japanese, so I can't say if I would agree with that claim or not. But I do know that I would never assume that the Japanese is the more true or canon version of the lore, or that it's closer to the writer's intentions. A lot of people assume that FromSoft games are simply written in Japanese and then translated to English, and that's mostly true with their previous titles at least, but it's always been a bit more complicated than that, and it's especially complicated with Elden Ring. First of all, Miyazaki works closely with the translators, and Ryan Morris, the primary English translator who's been working with FromSoft since Demon's Souls, has even written some original dialogue that was included in the final versions of some games. Miyazaki has also taken some terminology from the English translations and transferred it over to the Japanese because he thought the English version worked better. With Elden Ring, though, it's even more complicated than that. Elden Ring's lore was written first in English by George R.R. Martin, then the game was written in Japanese based on Martin's history and world building, then translated into other languages from there. Unfortunately, we don't have access to what Martin wrote, so it's impossible to say what elements of the lore are his inventions and which parts are from Miyazaki. For all we know, the item descriptions about ancient history, like the arrival of the Elden Beast, could be directly quoting things Martin wrote. We simply don't know one way or the other. So is the Japanese version more explicit that the Elden Beast is what became the Elden Ring? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. If that's the case, does it prove the claim that the beast is the ring? I don't think so. I think this is the best evidence for the beast being the ring, and I don't find it all that convincing. Certainly not conclusive, irrefutable proof. Another claim I've seen people make, attempting to prove that the beast is the ring, is that we actually see the Elden Ring transform into the Elden Beast in the phase transition cutscene between fighting Radagon and the Elden Beast. And that's simply not true. In fact, we see both the ring and the beast on screen at the same time separately. I've slowed it down for you here so you can clearly see what that cinematic actually shows. Now, do I think that's incontrovertible proof that they're two separate things? No, of course not. Analysis of any sort of art always has to leave adequate room for artistic license. Maybe what I see as the Elden Ring there is actually just the afterglow of where it was previously. Who knows? There's always a million interpretations you haven't thought of for any bit of lore. But if that cutscene is evidence for anything, I'd say it hints that the Elden Beast is not the Elden Ring. But that's just one small bit of vague evidence for that argument. What really sells me on the idea that the Golden Star is the proto-Elden Ring is the central plot point of the game. The fact that the Elden Ring is shattered, but the Elden Beast isn't. I don't believe that the Elden Ring is sentient. If it was, how would a mortal wield it? If it has its own mind and will, it could just say, no, I'm not empowering you to be the Lord of Chaos, or whatever. The theory that the Elden Beast is the true form of the Elden Ring just fundamentally doesn't make sense. And that's all for this video. Sorry for the low quality, it's my first attempt. This is the first video I've ever made, but there will be more coming. Lots of interesting Elden Ring lore to talk about, like the Dung Eater's connection to Norse mythology, how Baphomet is the central key to understanding Elden Ring lore, and I promise the video quality will get better as I figure out how to do this. Bear with me, I'm new here, and thanks for watching.